So listen, I'm really thrilled to be here for several reasons. First of all, I made a promise to Ninad to come back to Mumbai and have an event with him. So now that's mission accomplished. And Gobi, you filled my heart with so much joy. I was almost crying inside because you're like my twin brother. Like, you know, you said so many things that resonated with me. And you started out with that very powerful statement about abundance. And I will come back to that and actually conclude my talk on that, because abundance and the pursuit of abundance, material abundance, is what led us to the kind of, catastrophe we are facing today globally. But in Indian context, we have another kind of abundance we celebrate, which is inner abundance. So we'll come back to that. So it's the right pursuit, but the wrong intention. So we'll come back to that. And I think if we can use frugality from their perspective of inner abundance, we can, achieve amazing things. So I want you first to look at this expression, frugal innovation, because you never see these two words together in the same sentence. Think about an iPhone, right, which costs $600, probably will become a $1,000, product. So something innovative like an iPhone is never frugal. It's always premium product and expensive. And similarly, when you think about innovation, you think about big R&D labs, billions of dollars invested, in expensive R&D projects. And this is what happened since World War II, as the US and Europe tried to outspend each other in R&D, pumping billions of dollars in R&D. And now, of course, Asia is following the same trend, particularly led by, China. So I agree with, Gobi that, we need to step up on our R&D investments, but we also have to learn lessons from what happened elsewhere. And this massive amount of investments today is estimated to be about $700 billion a year. There's nothing, that I'm going to criticize about it, but there is something wrong with this picture, is that R&D investment is just the input that goes into innovation engine. The question is, what kind of output we get out of that? And here we have a problem, especially in Silicon Valley where I live, because a lot of this money goes into developing frivolous products like this juice maker that cost $700, which is supposedly Wi-Fi enabled to justify the hefty price tag. And they raised over $50 million in venture capital. And unfortunately, journalists revealed that this juice maker, Wi-Fi enabled juice maker, is no more effective than what I use every morning, which is a manual juicer, which costs only $1. Okay? And this is the kind of aberration that led Sam Pitroda to say that the best brains in the world are busy solving the problems of the rich who really don't have problems. And in fact, we do have mega problems. There are actually 17 of them, which are what we call the Sustainable Development Goals, which have been established by the United Nations, which really about looking at how do we deliver access to clean energy, clean water, sanitation services, gender equality, etc., to the billions of people in the world who are deprived from that today. And Vaibhav actually in a few minutes when we get to the panel discussion, is actually trying to crack this code as we speak right now, by bringing together 100 students from France and India, in Andheri actually, to give them these problems to solve, as opposed to developing a Wi-Fi enabled tea maker, which also was developed last year in Silicon Valley. After raising $100 million, they also went belly up. Okay? So clearly Silicon Valley is not a giver of lessons when it comes to frugality. So that's why me and my co-authors, after living half our lives in the land of plenty in the Western world, we decided to go back to our roots, which is resource-constrained environments like India and South America and to some extent Africa and China. And we discovered that actually the innovators in these resource-constrained environments have a very different mindset. Let me illustrate that. An engineer in Silicon Valley will come to work Monday morning asking himself or herself the question, what if I can connect my fridge to my smartphone? Because we all have a fridge at home, and we have a smartphone. If I run out of milk, it would be nice to get a text message end of the day, so I can remember to get a liter of milk on the way back home. Except that in India, somebody asked himself a more fundamental, big what-if question, which is, what if I create a fridge that operates without electricity? And this is a big what-if question because, as you know, 300 million people in India are still disconnected from electric grid. And this question wasn't asked by someone who has a PhD or an MBA, but by Mansukh Prajapati, who is a potter by training from Jugaad. And he invented Nitikool, which is fridge made entirely of clay, which doesn't consume electricity and is 100% biodegradable. And it simply uses the principle of evaporation to absorb the heat and retain the humidity in their chambers, thus preserving fruits and vegetables fresh for 5 days and milk for several days. So what we discovered in emerging markets is that innovators are like alchemists. They have this unique ability to transform adversity into opportunity. So when you put a limitation on resources, you remove the limitation on creativity. And we see this ability to do more with less in places like Peru, which is a country that has a 90% humidity rate and receives only 1 inch of rainfall. And the local engineering college developed a giant advertising billboard that absorbs the humidity in the air, condenses it, purifies it, and generates 100 liters of drinkable water every day. Okay? Literally out of thin air, they can create something that doesn't exist. That's also important. That means that we have to look at what is abundant when we don't see it. So in this country, there's a lot of abundance of humidity, but scarcity of water. So one of the kind of principle of frugal innovation is that you use what is abundant to overcome what is scarce, instead of depleting what is scarce, right? With the assumption it's abundant. And you see that also in technology sphere in Africa. They use the abundance of mobile connectivity in a continent where 80% Africans don't have a bank account, 80% Africans don't have energy, electricity. So, but 80% Africans have a mobile phone. So they use solutions like M-Pesa, which enables today half the population in Kenya to send and receive money using their mobile phones without having a bank account. And today, half the population uses the solution and half the GDP is transacted to the system. I also, like Gopi, do not like too much reverse innovation because you beautifully capture that. Because it's from the Western perspective, right? From their perspective, you're saying that I am reversing now. Before, condescendingly, I forward you innovation. Now I'm reversing it from you. Having said that, it is a source of pride for us to realize that this solution that emanated from Africa is now being replicated in France. Orange, the telecom operator, having piloted a similar solution in Africa, has acquired a license to become a bank last year in France. And last week, they just launched a similar service in France and rest of Europe. So a solution, a frugal solution emanating from the south is now being adopted in the west. Now, of course, Gopi talked about Mongolian as well. Clearly, it's fantastic, but we have to do more. And yet, I think it's something we have to celebrate because in India we lack a culture of celebration. So I think kudos to ISRO for doing it. ISRO, so the entire budget of ISRO is what NASA spends a single day. Just think about it, right? So with that kind of spending, they're able to pull this off, right? At 1/10 of the cost of NASA, right? And so this is something to celebrate. And I agree with him that we have to go even further. And on that note, before I forget, I think the panel will discuss a lot about that. It is important, and Gopi beautifully captured that. We have to go from a nation of leapfroggers to a nation of trailblazers. That means it's not just say we are going to do better than NASA. We are going to create something whole different as a paradigm. And in the 90s, I remember I went to East Asia because Prime Minister Mahathir in Malaysia talked about leapfrogging. It was a huge concept that still remains today, which is a way for the poor countries to leapfrog the West. That means essentially we are going to be replicating the textbook written by our former colonial masters and implement it faster, better, cheaper. That is not good. That's leapfrogging. We need to trailblaze. We need to write the next textbook that even the West will adopt in the future. Okay? And we can do that in space, exploration as well. So building on, what Gopi said, frugal innovation is about doing more with less. But in the last 5 years with my co-authors, we are pushing the boundaries on the definition of this. And I agree with Gopi that my concern right now is that the West is kind of hijacking this concept. In many Western countries now, there are academic chairs being set up. A lot of practitioners embracing think tanks talking about frugal innovation, but in a very reductionist way, which is about doing more with less, which is all about efficiency and either cost saving or money making. But we decided to broaden the definition of frugal innovation to be about doing better with less. So what I mean by better is actually, you see, it's not about more value, but more values. It has almost like a moral dimension to it, a moral imperative, which is how do you create more not only economic value, but at the same time social value and environment value. It's like equation with 3 variables. Of course, economic, social, you get it, right, especially in India, but the environment is important. It's about how you go from reducing a carbon footprint to enlarging what we call the ecological handprint. In other words, can you build like, energy positive kind of, factories that not only pollute less, but generate clean electricity and drinkable water for local communities. And there are people doing it, and I will give you an example in a few minutes. So that's why environment is not in the bottom, which is very Judeo-Christian. I sinned, please forgive me. No, it's about can I maximize positive impact to the planet. Okay? And then resources, it's about money, financial resource, of course, natural resources like water, and time. My obsession is time. I was in Delhi last week, and that's why my voice is kind of broken. And I realized, like, oh my God, I need time. They are sitting on a time bomb here, right? And this country actually, old car makers are coming because this is the kind of the wild, wild west. This is the last frontier because of the car penetration is so low. I'm like, oh my God. Sorry. If already we have so much pollution right now, what's going to happen when we become like China or the US, right, where everybody is driving? So clearly we have to rush to come up with better solutions, and we have a golden window of opportunity here to come up with the frugal alternatives to transportation and building, etc. Just 70% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 have not been built yet, and most of them will be places like India. So we have a golden chance, to reinvent construction business. Now, all this sounds interesting, but where India can become a disruptor is actually when you start introducing an order of magnitude, which is what happens if you can come up with a solution that actually delivers 10x more value. I brought a product here to show you that. A solution delivers 10x more value at 10x fewer resources. That starts getting interesting, right? But what if we can push the boundary and say, I can actually deliver a solution that delivers 100 times more value using 100 times fewer resources. Then it becomes a real disruptive solution. So today there are millions of babies born prematurely, and we put them in an incubator that costs $20,000. And you can also see that it's kind of often difficult for the mother to have physical connection with the baby because it's inside this plexiglass structure. And in a poor country, $20,000 is a lot of money. Electricity is unreliable. So Jane Shan was a Stanford grad, and 3 other fellow students from Stanford got together to co-design this solution called Embrace, and this is what it looks like. It's like a design like a mini sleeping bag, and inside you have a wax-like material that you can put on a heating pad. It melts, and you reinsert that inside, and you can keep the baby at constant temperature for 6 hours straight. And this solution actually costs only $200. 1% of the cost of incubators. And not only that, but it allows for the physical bonding, physical kind of connection between mother and the kid, which is important not only for the physical survival of the baby, but for the long-term emotional well-being of the baby as well, which is important. And the first person that they saved is a very moving example, because the mother that lost, I believe, 3 kids before that, she had access to a solution like that, but she was able to save, her 4th kid because of the solution. So this is why I think that frugal innovation is ultimately not about doing more with less, but about maximizing joy while minimizing suffering. That is really what I see about, the value of frugal innovation. Now I want to kind of segue into the second part of my presentation to say that where India can really shine is to go beyond thinking about specific frugal products and think about using frugality as a core principle to fundamentally reinvent our economy and our society. And here I think it's important that we fundamentally rethink how we consume, and this is what I'm looking at my next book, right, which is called Conscious Society, is that I begin to see the rise of what I call conscious citizens, especially young people now, with a very different value system. 50% of young people want to share a car instead of owning a car. You have 66% of young people want to become entrepreneurs, be their own boss, and do something good for society as opposed to go work for large companies. So if you look at all these trends, social awareness, ecological responsibility, etc., what I think is really happening is that there is a kind of an increase in consciousness among citizens, particularly young people. So, of course, consciousness in Indian context is a very sophisticated meaning, which is based on the chakras, the energy centers located in our subtle body. There are 7 of them, as you know. And the first 3 have to do with the fear, desire, and power. Fear of survival, and then once you are safe, you look for desire, which is sexual initially, and then desire for more stuff. And then once you have more, it's not enough, you want to have it all. which is where power comes in. It's about control and domination, right, of others. And as long as you're operating with this mindset, and here I join what Gopi said, you suffer from a scarcity mindset because you don't have inner abundance. So you try to fill in the vacuum inside by getting something from the outside world and try to fill the hole with it. And because of that, because these three come from our primitive instincts, it's all about, me, me, me. So it's about self-centered, being self-centered. The shift happens in consciousness, and the sense of inner abundance awakens when you activate the anahata, which is essentially the heart chakra. This is where you have access to compassion, which is the passion to reduce the suffering of others. But in the West, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence as the next big thing after IQ. But in Indian context, EQ is just a stepping stone to have access to higher capabilities, starting with Vishuddhi, the throat chakra, where you discover your authentic self. Each of us is born with a unique song that we are uniquely qualified to sing. But unfortunately, most of us will die without ever discovering it. So the true song you're supposed to sing is actually right here in the throat. That's why it's here, right? You're not singing, but your own voice. And that's where ingenuity lies. So my previous book called Jugaad, actually, right? Jugaad Innovation. Jugaad really is here. The creativity that really comes from here, as opposed to the second chakra, that's also creativity. That's a different kind of raw creativity, which is about survival. This is where I discover the authentic creativity comes from here. And then intuition, where you realize that all the gifts and talents you have within you are here not to enrich you selfishly, but to serve others in a seva spirit. And that's why the intuition tells you how to transcend your intellect and emotions to find a larger purpose. So the idea is that, and I agree with Gopi, that this is where you discover the real meaning of abundance, which is inner abundance. And because you experience so much inner abundance, you don't experience scarcity anymore. If anything, there's so much richness inside, you're willing to share it with the world. Okay? So you go from being a taker to a giver. Okay? And you find much more peace and more harmony within yourself. Why I say that? Because more than the mindset, you need that new consciousness to use frugality to build this new economy, which is emerging. I call it the frugal economy. And the panel, I think, will go deeper into that because we have the pioneer of, the main architects of the frugal economy here with us. And this frugal economy, I think, will be powered by human energy and will rest on three key pillars, which is sharing, making, and reusing. So I want to quickly touch upon them because India has a golden opportunity, right? These pillars are still emerging in the West. We can actually, trailblaze and create a blueprint for, creating this frugal economy. So let's kind of start quickly and go through each of the pillars. Sharing, as you know very well, it's initially about sharing cars and apartments. Everybody knows that, but it's growing very fast with young people, particularly with platforms like BlaBlaCar, which is a ride-sharing platform, which already has 30 million, members. The fastest growing market, I believe, is in India right now. But that's the tip of the iceberg. PwC thinks that this market of B2C sharing will be $350 billion by 2025. I think that the B2B sharing, when the businesses start sharing, and we talk about open innovation, this is like the next chapter of innovation, is what happens when businesses start sharing waste, assets, resources, employees, clients, and potentially intellectual property. And this is starting to happen in different sectors. There's one that I like, since we talked about farming. This is Rohtash Mal, the former CEO of Escort, the tractor company. And at 60, he decided to become an entrepreneur. And he's running this company called EM3, which is the Uber for farmers. And the idea is that, if you're a farmer, you press a button on an iPhone, and somebody comes on a tractor and says, I'm here to help you harvest. The idea is to go from a fixed cost, an equipment, to something which is variable, accessible on demand, pay-as-you-go basis. It could be farming equipment, or it could be expertise, like soil analysis, the selection of fertilizers, and etc. etc. So we are beginning to see B2B sharing slowly emerging, and India can be a pioneer of that. It's a frugal, right? Because if you share assets as opposed to owning them, it's another way, to actually optimize these assets in a collaborative fashion. The second pillar, of course, is making. This is the notion that in the old times, the motto of the consumers was, I consume, therefore I am. The new motto is, I create, therefore I am. More and more customers are saying, instead of going to IKEA to buy a chair, I want to make it myself. I have a different kind of emotional connection with the product if I built it as opposed to passively, buying and consuming it. And here we have interesting building blocks emerging for the maker economy. There are two of them. One is the low-cost technologies that allow you now to create more economic social value with fewer resources. I brought one of them. This is called Raspberry Pi. This is developed at Cambridge University. And this is actually a computer the size of a credit card, as you can see. And this costs only $35. And it's also open source. You can actually improve the code inside. And initially designed to teach kids programming. And the next thing they know, within 6 years, they sold 16 million units of this. And this is now being used to come up with amazing solutions. Like this one on the right is at the Akanksha school. I think it's in Pune, actually, so you know this very well. And what they have done is they have taken there are 5 billion people in the world who are not connected to internet. So one of the idea here about frugal innovation is that when a citizen or a customer cannot have access to a good or service, that has to come to the him or her. So if the kid cannot have access to knowledge, the knowledge has to find a way to get to the kid. And this is what happens here. So they take all the Wikipedia, the Khan Academy content, online tutorials in science and technology, and they download that into that. And this is Wi-Fi enabled, so you can drop it here on the table. And then the kids can actually use the Akash low-cost tablet to access this content offline without going to the internet. And what is amazing is that the kids actually set up this whole system in 2 hours. They self-configure it. They learn from each other. Okay? This is the future of education, right? School in the box, right? Very frugal. And of course, there's something else happens is that, I say that in the 20th century, knowledge was power. In the 21st century, ignorance is power. The less you know about a sector, the more easily you can disrupt. Not only that, there's a deeper meaning to that. Because the less you know about something, the more open you are as a student. You have beginner's mind to receive new knowledge. Otherwise, you think like an expert. And this is where we are lucky to have Vaibhav here, who is the founder of a makerspace called Makers Asylum. We can go, as I say, from aspiration to prototype in a matter of days. So if you want to have an impact on society by coming up, with a frugal solution for healthcare or for energy or, any sector you pick, you can actually go there and have access to, of course, the tools like, laser cutters or 3D printers, of course, to build a prototype. But more importantly, a community of experts who can help you, who can teach you whatever you need. If you want to build a chair, as I said, you may not be a carpenter, but there will be people who know how to do that, and they can help you, mentor you, so that you have a safe environment, a nurturing environment where you can actually learn and actually use newly acquired knowledge to come up with a social relevant solution. And Vaibhav will talk more about some of the amazing things happening here because there are doctors now coming here to develop their own devices. So maybe I think there's something that G has to think about as well. I call them the Dr. MacGyver, right? What happens if the domain experts like doctors say, we are not satisfied with the existing medical equipment and we want to create our own, and I can do that by going to Makerspace. Okay. Then the third pillar is reusing. This is a country, as you know, in India, nothing gets wasted, everything is reused. And this is happening, of course, with in the West. It's always amazing, right? They take something that has been practicing in developing world for so long, and they come up with a fancy term for it. And the fancy term going around these days, and it's called the circular economy. And this is in contrast with the linear economy, where today you extract raw materials, you make a cell phone, use it for a couple of years, and it goes into a landfill. And the circular economy, you design the product in such a way that at the end of the life, let's say this carpet, you can recover 99% of materials inside to make a new product. And Accenture estimates that with the application of the circular economy principles, we can unleash nearly $5 trillion of economic value globally. There are companies already doing it, sophisticated applications like Levi Strauss, the jeans maker. They make a pair of jeans with 8 recycled plastic bottles. And as you know, the oceans are filled with a lot of plastic waste. So they collect that plastic waste to make apparel. Okay? Or next time you have filter coffee, don't throw the waste, because out of coffee waste you can make 16 different products at least. And many startups now making cosmetics, organic fertilizers, or pellets for cooking out of coffee waste. So this is where waste becomes gold. So you become an alchemist. You take something of low value and you learn to transform by recycling and upcycling into something of high value. But I think something more profound would be what happens if the whole value chain goes from this old paradigm of exploitation, take more resources and say, take, to a give. Right? So this is happening, starting with factories. We call them factory as forest. These are energy positive kind of factories. This company called Interface, which makes carpets for hotels and hospitals and schools. They are building these factories actually that will deliver 20 ecological services. That means that essentially they will deliver clean solar energy to the surrounding community, potable water as a byproduct of the manufacturing process, etc. 20 of them. So that means that again, instead of reducing the ecological footprint, negative one, they're going to enlarge the positive impact. So that's called regenerative business. And this is important because at the rate at which we are consuming, by 2030 we are going to need 3 planets to supply us resources and absorb waste. So unless we become regenerative, planet Earth is going to pull the plug, probably on us as a species and say, good experimentation, but bye-bye. So I think India can pioneer this frugal economy, by erecting these 3 pillars of sharing, making, reusing, and we have a stellar panelist who are going to go into details about how to make that happen. And there's urgency. There's urgency because if you take all the water on Earth and you try to model it, this is what it looks like, And then if you take all the drinkable water, this is all that is left, this tiny droplet, right? And that's with 7 billion people on planet. And when I'm going to have 10 billion people by 2060, you can realize that we have to definitely learn to do more with less. So there is a sense of urgency, and that's why I think frugality is not a luxury. It's something that has become a cradle for all policymakers and CEOs worldwide. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and we're going to now, I think, transition to panel. Thank you very much.